Hello, everybody. It's good to be back. It's the Dattitude Podcast. Jeff Duncan. I'm Jim Derry, and it's Friday morning, and we are talking Saints, and probably we'll talk a little bit Pelicans, and we got a couple other little interesting nuggets that we'll get to as well this morning. We're going to be taking your comments and questions all morning here. Dunk is willing to answer any question you might have, whether it be about the Saints, Pelicans, LSU, Tulane. He'll even tell you what to buy your wife for a Christmas present if that's what you so choose to ask it. All righty. Aspen Angel says hi from Phoenix, where it's probably a lot warmer in Phoenix this morning. Dunk, what's going on?
Not much, brother. Ready for another great show. And I was up late last night watching that Pels game. So, as I've gotten older, man, I need my sleep. I'm like hurting. Those games get going late on the West Coast. I'm struggling to stay awake.
Sleep? What's that? Do we sleep anymore between August and January? Not much. That was
a tough loss for the Pels last night. Couldn't quite close it out.
Aspen Angel says it's 42 degrees. That's exactly the temperature when I woke up this morning in Mandeville. It was 42 when I woke up this morning to bring the little one to the bus stop for the last time in 2 weeks. That's one thing, Dunk, about the holidays. Look, I'm not going to be a Scrooge or anything, but it is not easy trying to work with the little ones at home for the next 2 weeks.
Yeah,
they are going to be home doing nothing. I never understood this. It's December the 18th. You don't have school again until January. I don't get it. But
yeah, we're going to get our soapbox here. Back when I was in school,
exactly.
2 weeks.
We walked there, both uphill both ways, 7 miles.
Yeah,
Joseph Garcia, who dat from Colorado. We thank you for joining us all the way from Colorado. I know it's colder in Colorado than it is here. Dunk, let's talk Saints and Falcons. And, going into this week, I think I'm finally over it. I'm finally over that just debacle. I don't even know what you call it. We haven't talked since then, I don't think. But that just dreaded Monday night game. They've been on a bye and had 13 days off or will by the time they play. Just a mess that this season has become.
Yeah, it was a devastating loss. I mean, especially the way it transpired, right? I mean, I know every Saints fan was probably sitting there looking at the scoreboard, looking at the score, doing the calculus in their head and thinking, oh my gosh, this actually could happen if they score 2 touchdowns and they had just the right amount of time. And look, I thought Brady was masterful, and no one wants to hear that, but he was unbelievable. I mean, all of a sudden, he could do no wrong. And once they got that momentum, the defense was a little bit on its heels, and it was just a crushing loss, considering everything that was on the line there, the stakes. I mean, if you look at it now, the Saints would be in really good shape to make
that actually leads into Patty Duke. She used to have a show, didn't she? Patty Duke used to have a show. All right, well, today you're in NOLA, and you're wondering if the Saints are going to make it to the playoffs. And I don't usually cut off Jeff Duncan, but that leads right into where we're going. The Saints are not going to make it to the playoffs. I mean, they would need an absolute Christmas, New Year's, and Mardi Gras miracle to make it to the playoffs at this point. They would have to win out. They would have to hope that Tampa wins just one more, and that Carolina wins just one more. So,
yeah, they got to. This is the way I would describe it, Patty. Yes, they're still alive, but it's like having one ticket in the Powerball. You got a chance, but it's infinitesimal. They're all but eliminated. Matter of fact, that's what I wrote in my column today that's going to run in Sunday's paper is, they haven't been in this position very much at all in the last 15, 16 years. They haven't played very many what I call irrelevant or meaningless games. They've always kind of been in the mix, had something to play for. I think the last time they were in this position, JD, was
2016.
2016. It was a very similar kind of position where they were still mathematically alive, but it would take them winning every game and the other teams losing every game. And that's not going to happen. That's kind of where they're at right now. So I wouldn't count on, especially with a road game in a few weeks at Philadelphia. That one looks kind of ugly right now.
So you're saying there's a chance.
I mean, one of the great movie lines of all time.
Exactly. I mean, that's kind of where we are now. And what's the worst part of it all? And we talk about 2016, that mini run from 2014 to 2016, where they went 7-9. At least they were 7-9. They were competitive. They were relevant in December.
Yeah.
I mean, this is the first time I think where they just aren't relevant with 4 games to go since 2015. I mean, 2005, excuse me.
And here's the thing, and like I know we've talked about it on the show before, but I don't want to sound like a Debbie Downer or whatever, but
That's my job.
I know, but I think it's been, actually counterproductive that they've been in this historically bad division. Look, everybody wants hope, and I get it. As a fan, you want to be able to make the playoffs, but there's only 3 teams in the league worse than the Saints, and I think it's kind of masked this bad division that's kept New Orleans somewhat alive in the playoff race. I think it's masked how bad the team has been. Everyone's able to say, oh, well, we're only a game away, or if we just would have beat Tampa. Well, you're also only maybe 1 win away from being next to the Texans as the worst team in the entire NFL.
Just think if they had lost Atlanta in that first game, how different things, if they don't come back and make that comeback. Jerry, our regular, Jerry is here. He is here and saying who dat and beat the Falcons on Sunday. Hey, look, you still gotta root for your team, even if they stink.
Yes.
I mean, it is what it is. Like I said, it's been a long time the Saints have been in a position with 4 games left where they're irrelevant, and that's really kind of where we are. And hello, good morning to you, Catherine. Thanks for joining us. Patty says she hates to hear that. She's a true who dat. I drink to that. Oh, she drinks to that. Okay, well, if you want to drink at 9:15, it is a holiday. I mean, I got my Starbucks, but who knows what I'll be drinking later on this afternoon because I'm actually off this weekend. I don't remember the last time I was off on a weekend,
Nice.
So I'm gonna enjoy it. And speaking of that, little programming note: Duncan and I are going to be doing our live show next week. We're going to be doing it on Wednesday because I'm going to be taking a little mini 6-day vacation. I'm doing absolutely nothing, staying around the house. I'm going to enjoy my children and my wife and my family, and that's about all I'm going to do. And maybe watch a couple of really bad bowl games, but we'll see how that goes.
That sounds like a great week.
It's a perfect way to spend a vacation in New Orleans. You spend it at home. We're going to see the Grinch in the Sanger, I think.
Yeah, that'll be fun.
Doing that on Monday. Who knows? We might go to Christmas in the Oaks, and looking forward to it. So you know what? The Saints losing is not the end of the world. It really is not the end of the world. But they can finish with on a strong note, and I think, Dunk, that is important for a lot of people's psyche, including some of the players on this team. It starts this week with the Atlanta Falcons, and this is actually, we'll get into our predictions before we get to the end of the show. And Jerry, I will probably have some eggnog and some other things that go with eggnog. But you talk about this team. The Saints are 4-point favorites. When I saw this line at first, I was like a little weird, but then I started diving into the numbers. And Atlanta's really in the same boat now. They've kind of given up on their season. They're going to spend the next 4 weeks probably as kind of an early preseason to see what they have in quarterback Desmond Ridder, Duncan. I think the Saints, they do one of two things. They either stink up the joint and give it all up and say, you know what, we stunk, we lost, whatever, our season's over, or they come out and have a little heart. And you know what? I think they're going to have a little heart. I'm not going to give my prediction here, but I think the Saints will play well. This is a good matchup. The Saints have done very well in this series over the years, over the past, decade or so or beyond. But a 4-point favorite, there's a reason why the Saints are favored.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. And look, the vibe coming out of the locker room has been real positive. That's one of the things I would say that's a positive is you don't get the sense the team is checked out at all. I mean, they have a really good attitude going into this game. I think they're going to play well. I'm curious to see how Atlanta comes out. I don't know. They could kind of go one of two ways because Ridder, I don't know what you're getting with him. I've seen him play in college, but have no idea how he'll translate to an NFL offense. And his first game in the Superdome against the Saints, I mean, that's pretty intimidating environment. So I'll be interested to see. He's a Louisville kid. He actually under-recruited guy that played at a big power school. St. Xavier's a big power program, but he slipped through the cracks, and Cincinnati identified him. Really amazing recruiting job. But he's always had a lot of moxie, and he's obviously was a winner at Cincinnati. Took them to great heights as a program. So I wouldn't underestimate him. I mean, I kind of feel like this is the kind of guy that's been a winner most of his life. And he's probably been waiting for this moment for a while. So I don't think it's going to be necessarily a cakewalk just because you got a rookie QB.
There's no doubt about it. And Jerry, I hate to poo-poo on your plans here. If the Saints win Sunday with the Falcons loss, because they would beat the Falcons, the Panthers lost, and the Buccaneers lost Sunday, they're still alive. Yeah, they're still mathematically alive. But here's the problem. You need the Bucs and the Panthers. Each of those teams can only win one more game the rest of the season.
Yeah, each of
them. And they play each other.
Right.
So, in other words, whoever loses the Bucs-Panthers game, they can't win any other games. So not only do you need the Saints to win out beyond that, and the Saints still have to play Philadelphia coming up.
Right.
And the Saints are not going to beat Philadelphia.
I mean, the Saints have won their longest winning streak all year is one game. They won 2 games in a row. Now you're thinking they're going to win 4 in a row. It's kind of
it's not going to happen.
I mean, I like to be optimistic, but I like to be realistic too.
Also, there's a chance that the Saints are underdogs in their remaining 3 games after this one. They're already 3-point dogs against Cleveland, so they're going to be dogs. They're going to be big dogs in Philadelphia. I mean, that may be double digits. I'll have to go look up and see the last time the Saints were double-digit dogs, because they might be double-digit dogs in Philly. Yeah. And then they end the season at home against Carolina. And if Carolina is fighting for an NFC South title, I promise you the Panthers will be favored in that game, which would be odd and strange.
Well, here's the one thing I would say, though. The more we watch these other games, and I watched the Seahawks 49ers last night.
Yeah.
The one silver lining I have seen is the Saints defense has played extremely well. I know they gave up those 2 late drives against Brady, but the way they played the Niners, I mean, no one's played the Niners that well in the last month or so. They look like a Super Bowl team, even with Brock Purdy.
Right.
So, there is encouraging signs at least out of the defense. The offense has just been hamstrung. I think they're going to have to make some changes in the offseason to what they're doing on that side of the ball. I know they don't have Mike Thomas. We know all these things who they don't have, but I'm watching the Niners last night. They're playing with their 3rd-string quarterback, and they don't have Deebo Samuel, and they're still very effective.
It's amazing, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, everybody's got these problems. Everybody's missing key players. It's how you deal with it, and the Saints have not dealt with it offensively as good as they should.
It is the holiday season, so I'm going to try to be a lot nicer than I usually am about this time. So, look, it comes down to, you look at other teams. And here's the thing, though. To me, and this year in particular, you could say this about a lot of years, Dunk, but I think this year in particular, there are 5 teams in the NFL right now, maybe 6. I'll tell you what, there's 6. There's 6 teams in the NFL, 3 on each side, that have a legitimate chance to win the Super Bowl. No one else. And in the NFC, it's San Francisco, Philadelphia, and Dallas. No one else. No one else has a chance to win the Super Bowl. In the AFC, it's Kansas City, Buffalo, and if you want to throw Cincinnati in there, sure. I don't think they're going to win it, but I guess those 6 teams have a chance. No one else has a chance to win the Super Bowl. So the bad news is you're not going to the playoffs. The good news is, and I guess it's not good news or whatever it is, but if you went to the playoffs, you're not going to win it anyway.
Right. That's exactly right. And I agree with you 100%. I actually think it's those 5. I wouldn't throw Cincinnati in there, but I guess you could with Joe Burrow. But you could probably make some money. I don't know you would know better than me the odds. If you just put 100 on each of those 5 to win, you might have a profit.
You would probably, I think you would break even if Kansas City won, because you would lose the other bets. But you would win money if you had bets on the other ones. But you kind of missed the boat on a couple of those teams, because I got San Francisco in a future at I think it's either 18-1 or 20-1.
Whoa!
But I got it early.
I mean, their defense, they're rolling right now, man. They look really good.
Brock Purdy, could you imagine if the Saints, and I know 30 other teams are saying the same thing, but could you imagine had the Saints drafted a guy like Brock Purdy? Yeah. Not that he would have ever seen the light of day, because they tried that with Ian Book, but I mean, this kid's got moxie.
I know. He's a winner. I mean, you can just see it's not too big for him. And so, and look, I think a lot of it has to go. You have to put on the shoulders of Kyle Shanahan and what they're asking him to do. They've got 100%. Such a good team around him. I think that's what the Saints thought they were going to be this year. They thought they were going to be good enough on defense, good enough on the offensive line, have a good running game, that the quarterback could be the trailer, not the truck, and they could survive. And they overestimated that. They're not as good in these other areas, or they're not as well coached, one or the other, however you want to put it. But they can't survive when they get in these games against the elite teams. Their quarterback play gets exposed. And so you're right. When you get in the playoffs, you're going to be facing these elite quarterbacks, and you have such a severe disadvantage at the most important position that we see what happens in those games. I mean, look at the Bengals game. The Saints were toe-to-toe with the Bengals the whole game. Were leading most of the game. When it came down to the end, what quarterback made all the plays? The other quarterback couldn't do it.
That's right. I am Jim Derry. He is Jeff Duncan, and we do this every Friday morning at 9:15. It's the Dattitude Podcast as we preview the Saints and the Falcons going into this Sunday. And we kind of touched on it, but I think if you were listening, you can kind of both you kind of understand where we both are going with this. We will tell you, and also we're going to be taking your comments and questions for about the next 20, 25 minutes. We'll be on the air. Feel free to leave them either on Facebook or on YouTube, as others have done this morning. But one thing I want to look at, and this is telling to me, we do these graphics, and sometimes we just kind of gloss over them because, it's that I don't know that you see a big advantage. This is why the Saints have a huge – not only have the Falcons essentially, I think, given up by announcing they're going to start Desmond Ridder. I know Marcus Mariota is having surgery, but it's conveniently having surgery. I think they're doing that just to take the pressure off of Desmond Ridder, and now they could say he's our quarterback for the rest of the year no matter what. But you look at these numbers, you wonder how the Saints have a worse record than the Falcons. They're 11th in total defense. They're 16th in total offense. By the way, that number on total offense is continually has been sinking like a rock. It was about, I think they were up to 6th about 7-8 weeks ago. Now down to 16th. That's a whole nother story. But you look at Atlanta's defense, it's terrible, Dunk. They're and other than running the football with Cordero Patterson, they can't do anything.
Right. And I don't know how well they're going to run without Mariota, because they were able to run a lot of RPO with him, and that was a kind of a funky offense. We saw the Saints kind of struggle to stop that in week 1. Now you've got Ridder. Ridder's athletic, and he can definitely move around, but he's not the runner Mariota is.
Right.
So I don't know if they're going to be able to run as well. And that's right into the teeth of the Saints' strength, their run defense. So, yeah, I like the Saints in this game. I think it all comes down to their attitude, and the attitude I've seen this week has been very positive. And so I think, look, they've had a lot of bad luck this year. They've also been their own worst enemies, and they also have given some games away through either coaching or whatever you want to call it, their own lack of discipline, attention to detail. We could go down a laundry list of that Bucs game of just egregious mistakes and how they finished. Those things, come back to haunt you, and that's where the Saints are right now. If they just won 1 or 2 of those games, they'd still be at least in the mix.
1 or 2 of those games. I mean, let's just talk about the Bucs game. And I don't want to depress anyone. And it's funny because we're 19 and a half minutes into a show now, and it shows you how a bye week can just kind of like chill everybody. Because if we had this show on Tuesday, the comments would have been a lot different. The fire DA comments would have been all over. I haven't had a single fire DA comment. We're almost 20 minutes into the show. But it's not 1 or 2 games. As bad as the Saints are, had the Saints held on and not blown up and won the game where they had about a 92% chance to win, they would be 5-8. Tampa would be 5-8. Carolina would be 5-8. The Falcons would be 5-8. They would all be tied atop the division, and the Saints would have the upper hand. Not only would they wouldn't need anything to happen. They would control their own destiny, as bad as that is. So that's how sad that collapse was, and kind of apropos of the entire season, because the Saints would be controlling their own destiny had they won that game against Tampa Bay.
I know, but again, that gets back to what I'm saying. Like it still doesn't mask that you've got major problems, and I just, as someone that's covered the team, I like to look at things from a 50,000 foot view, and what I see is not good. I'm used to seeing the Saints being a very competitive, winning, successful team. I know what that looks like. Saints fans know what that looks like, and this isn't it. I mean, even if they would have won last week, like you said, they have no hope of really making a run in the playoffs. They got a long way to go, and I don't know how they get there on this path right now without a long-term answer at quarterback, salary cap issues. The future looks pretty bleak. That was what I wrote.
Very bleak.
That the future looks actually bleaker than the present, and that's scary. I mean, they could be in for a long rebuilding job here, and I don't know how they make it, how they accelerate that process.
I would say that the Saints' future looks worse today than it did this same time in 2015, except the physical surroundings. Obviously, the dome was a mess in 2005, and I keep saying 2015. I mean 2005. The dome was a mess, so you didn't know. And at the time, I don't know if people remember this, but there was, talk of maybe going to San Antonio. They had to get Tom Benson had to get a deal done, and and Bobby Jindal, I think, or Blanco, I don't remember which one. They had to get this deal.
It was Blanco.
It was Blanco. So they had to put together this deal to keep the Saints here, and there was so from that perspective, yeah, things were worse in 2005. But just from a team perspective, at least the Saints then weren't in the cap hell that they're in now. Whereas, and I talked about this before, I brought this up before, but just Lattimore and Mike Thomas, those two guys, $60 million against the cap next year. So those two guys alone, I'm not talking about anybody else. So the Saints just don't have any room to bring in some free agent quarterback. They're going to have to get super lucky in the later rounds of the draft. And I'm not certain that they can do that.
Well, here's the other thing. You alluded to it right there. If you had to ask me, what was the number one thing that's happened this year that sunk this team to 4-9? I think you touched on it. When you look at team building and how general managers and head coaches build a team, they decide, years out who's going to be their core, who they're going to pay. And the Saints a few years back had this plan, right? And they been very selective on who they decided to give second contracts to. And we can go down the list. That's the core, right? Mike Thomas, Alvin Kamara, Marshawn Lattimore, Ryan Ramczyk. You could maybe even make an argument, Jameis Winston, who they brought back and gave a second contract to. So this is the core that should be carrying this team. And you're not getting much of anything out of any of those guys. Ramczyk is not the same player he was before his knee injury. He's still a very good right tackle, but he's not the best, most dominant right tackle in the game anymore. And you've really gotten nothing out of Lattimore, Kamara, and Thomas this year comparatively to what you're paying them. I mean, they're all making $15 to $20 million a year, and you've gotten nothing out of those guys this year. I mean, Kamara's been okay, but Thomas has been injured all year, and Lattimore's been injured. So that, to me, is what's undone this season. Your core has basically abandoned you, deserted you in production, and you can't overcome that in this league when you have a salary cap.
And that's why, to me, I hear all these talk, and I've had people ask me questions over the past week or so about the rumors of Sean Payton coming back to the Saints. And to put it in only a way a New Orleanian can put it, that ain't happening. I mean, why would anybody want to come back? Anybody the caliber of Sean Payton want to come back to this dumpster fire? That's the way it is. I'm not blaming it. Look, the Saints sold out to try to win a Super Bowl, and they nearly did. I mean, you talk about the Minneapolis Miracle, and this goes back more than just the last couple of years. The Minneapolis Miracle, the no call in the last year of Drew Brees, they did everything they could to try to win a championship. Look, I'm a huge Cubs fan. Anybody that watches me, that has listened to me or watched or whatever, who knows me at all, knows that I'm a big Cubs fan. The Cubs did the same thing. They sold out. They put the future aside to win the World Series in 2016. The Saints did the same thing, and they almost won a Super Bowl again. So, I mean, you can't complain about it to some extent, but they are such in dire straits right now that I think that it's going to take, just like the Cubs. I mean, the Cubs have never rebounded from that World Series, and they've just been a mess. And they're finally starting to be able to have money again, but it's taken them 5 years. I think it's going to take the Saints 3, 4, maybe 5 years to get out of this hole that they're in right now, because they have put off the future, and now there's nowhere else to put it. Even the great Mickey Loomis and all the other masterminds in that building, they can't get themselves out of this one, I don't think.
No, you're really spot on, and I think there's a couple things I'd like to say about that. One, I understand why they did it. There's no doubt that that's always been the mentality, the MO of Mickey Loomis, and when Sean Payton was here. I mean, they wanted to compete every year. They never wanted to have the quote transition year. They always wanted to have that door open, and I get that, and that's something that the fans, I think, should not take for granted. I wrote about this today. They've always been in the mix. I mean, they're always there. Even last year, all the way to the last game, they were still in it. And this isn't the case very often around the NFL. It's hard to do that. But the other thing I would say is the way this organization's built, the way the Saints operate business-wise, they need to be good every year because they rely on ticket sales. They're the way they refer to it out there is we're the Walmart of the NFL. They need their margins. They don't have huge corporate support. They don't have huge Fortune 500 companies to support them with suite and sponsorship sales. They need butts in the seats. And to do that, you got to be good. Otherwise, people stop going to your games. And they've been sold out, we know now, for going close to 20 years every game. I think that's going to start being a downturn if this team is headed the way it looks like they're headed. And that's going to be interesting to see how they deal with that in the front office and ownership, because I don't see how, like you said, I don't see how they avoid it right now as bleak as everything looks.
They can pull a rabbit out of this hat, then I'm just got to tip my cap because I don't see it. I mean, I think you're looking at at least 2 more years, maybe 3 of 4, 5 win seasons. I mean, look, I have been both on the Dennis Allen boat and off the Dennis Allen boat, and I just don't like the way that he's coached this year. I mean, I had a lot of hopes, I guess is the right way to put it. I agreed with Mickey Loomis that it was the right decision to make to bring him in here, well, to keep him here, I guess, and promote him because he had earned it. I thought he had earned that, and not only that, the Saints were doing what they could to get status quo. Kind of part of kicking the can. You keep that can as long as you can, and the way to stay status quo was to bring DA in as coach. That being said, I'm not certain why Dennis Allen would even want to stay around. I know you want to be a head coach, but Dennis Allen to me is ruining any chance he has to be a head coach again, because if the Saints do what I think they're going to do the rest of this year or next year, they might get to 6 wins. I said 10 weeks ago they were going to win 6 games if they had Andy Dalton as their quarterback. It's a decision he made. He has to live with it. I don't know whether things would have changed or not. But I think next year is going to be worse. So, I mean, if you're DA and you have a 6-win season this year and they're going to keep him. So get that out of your mind, Saints fans. Dennis Allen is going to be the coach of this team next year, unless he doesn't want to be. But, what does he do now? I mean, he goes 6-11, Dunk, and then next year he goes 5-12 or 4-13. He's done as a head coach. He's never going to get a chance again.
Yeah, the only way I think the only path I see out of this is, overhauling maybe some of the offensive staff, making some changes there, happen. Bringing in, a high-profile offensive coordinator, almost like a head coach of the offense. Mm-hmm. Say, for instance, Cliff Kingsbury, somebody like that that's got a name, got a reputation, can almost be the head coach of the offense. And then you whatever you do at quarterback, maybe you bring in a different quarterback, you draft one. You can at least sell that to the fan base of, hey, we got a fresh approach. We know our defense is pretty good. DA can coach the defense. We've seen that. And maybe you just admit you took a mulligan on the offense in that 1 year. That's the only way I see out of this. And I think that's probably the path organizationally they'll travel in this offseason. I
agree. And look, I think you know this. I don't think Pete Carmichael even wanted this job. I think they kind of talked him into it, and he wasn't ready for it. I don't want to say I don't blame him because, I mean, I think a lot of the offensive woes are his fault. But at the same time, I can sympathize with him because I don't think he wanted this job.
Yeah, he wanted a lower profile position on the offensive staff, and they went out and interviewed a bunch of people. They didn't have a lot of top candidates either. I mean, the candidates they interviewed were not what I would consider. They need to go out and find another young Sean Payton's what they need to find. They need to
100%.
Those guys don't grow on trees, but you can find one.
100%. Take a chance.
They need to get somebody that's innovative and really, I think, somebody that's got a fresh set of eyes on their offensive system, because I understand why they wanted the continuity and the stability of the Sean Payton tree. It made sense at the time, but it feels a little stale right now. And I think maybe it might help get guys like Alvin Kamara and Mike Thomas back on board and maybe re-energize, because both of them seem checked out this season.
I couldn't agree more. I think that's exactly, and I think you don't need to announce it as co-head coaches, but me, Dennis Allen calls the defense, decides when to call timeout, and decides when to review. And other than that, he doesn't have anything to do with offense. He can sit there and look pretty with the headset on when the offense is on the field. I agree 100%. They need a guy like that. And I think Cliff Kingsbury is a terrible head coach. I mean, I think he's an awful head coach, but I do think that he could be a great offensive coordinator, just an offensive coordinator. And so somebody like that, or like you say, I don't think the Saints have anything to lose. I think you go out. They didn't have anything to lose going into the 2006 season when they brought Sean Payton in here. Obviously, he had a great pedigree. He came highly recommended from Bill Parcells, which to me, that's good enough for me. But no one could have, at that, if you go back in time and go and bring yourself back to, 17 years ago, no one could have ever predicted the Saints would have done what they were going to do over the course of the next decade and a half. And the Saints need to take a chance now. I don't think they're going to get rid of Dennis Allen, but I wish he would be willing to accept going back to being a defensive coordinator, and they could bring someone like that in, or at least, like you say, basically have co-head coaches and take a chance on someone that, no one else is given a chance, or no one can see. The Brian Daboll of the world, who looked like, look what he's been able to do in just a year.
Right.
You talk about somebody like that. So I agree with you. They need some fresh blood. They need some fresh energy in this building.
But they got a lot of big decisions to make, in free agency this offseason. I mean, what do you do with Marcus Davenport? Caden Ellis has emerged. I mean, there's just a lot of guys that they need to have back. Some of the younger players that should be ascending players, right? Their needles pointed up. They're the ones that are going to command bigger contracts. And we've seen in the past, the Saints have had to make some very difficult decisions. And you got really good players like Trey Hendrickson, Von Bell, Marcus Williams, go down the list, playing on other teams and producing. And the Saints are just getting older on defense. And that's the concern I have.
Well, and I talked about actually 2 years ago. I mean, before the 2021 season, I said, look, the Saints window is closing really quickly. And not because of the offense. The offense is already, was taking a dive a little bit. And it was really because you could see, as good as this defense was, not getting any younger. And now to the point now we've seen they've kind of aged in front of our eyes. Cam Jordan, how much longer is he going to want to stick around? Even if he could play another year or two, does he want to watch? Does he want to be a part of a losing team? He's never been a part of a losing team before.
Yeah, I think that's hard when you've won for as long as those guys have. They've seen what it's like to be a part of a successful, functioning team. Right. They know what it's like. And I guarantee you privately, they won't say it publicly because they're team leaders, but privately they're going, this ain't it. What I'm watching ain't it. And that's probably why we see some of the body language and some of the things that we're seeing this year, because these guys know. They know better than anybody what it's like to be a good team.
You got about another 10 to 12 minutes to give us your comments and questions. If you want to give a prediction, we're going to get into that in just a minute. James Riley says, Frank Smith, offensive coordinator of the Miami Dolphins, will bring back Sean. Here's the problem. First of all, you're not getting Sean Payton. I've already said he's not going to come back to this mess. He's going to go somewhere where he thinks he's going to be successful, and it's not going to be here. The problem with the offensive coordinator of the Miami Dolphins is he's not the one that's made that Miami offense better. Dunk. You want to talk about teams taking chances? Miami is got their Kyle Shanahan clone over there.
Right. But Daniel's done a great job there. They got a big game Saturday night.
Yes, they do.
In Buffalo. But they're on the right path. I mean, that's a talented team, and you have to feel good about where they're going. Yeah, there's bright minds all over the league. You can find somebody. They found Sean Payton. Mickey Loomis is a very astute guy, very connected. I have no doubt that if they want to make a change at OC, that they'll find somebody that can come in there. But they need somebody. I think they need an experienced hand there. I think, they could use another like head coach type of person in that building. I know that was what Doug Marrone was supposed to be. He has not, I don't think, been the guy that they thought they were getting in the offensive line. But I do think they could make some changes to the offensive staff. And look, there might be some changes where guys leave on their own too. I mean, some guys will have contracts that are up, and can get hired away. This offseason is going to be very interesting to see how it plays out. But there's going to be changes. There's no doubt in my mind.
I got a name for you. Joe Brady.
Wow. I didn't think about him. That's a good idea.
What's he doing right now?
Quarterback coach for the Buffalo Bills.
Bring him in.
You could get him. You certainly could get him.
I think that would be a great fit to come in here, and a young guy who I think eventually is going to be an NFL head coach. So, that would be.
He knows the system. He probably want to put his own tweaks on it, but he knows the Saints system. I mean, he was involved in it. So,
and I think that's you're in a kind of you can gamble. I mean, it's the same with it's a different scenario, but we were talking about early in the season. The difference between Andy Dalton and Jameis Winston is with Andy Dalton, you know what you're getting. You're going to go 6-11. That's what they're going. I mean, it's not a surprise. Jameis Winston, you stick him back in there in week 6 or week 7. You might go 5-12. You might go 9-8. You have no idea, which was kind of the point. So I think the Saints are in a position now where going forward, they can take chances. I think I got to be honest, the entire offensive staff needs to go. I'm okay with DA staying. I understand where they are right there. He may grow. I think he's going to learn a lot from this season. I hope that he gets better. But they need to make serious changes on the offensive coaching staff. And again, Pete Carmichael didn't want this job, and he's just not fit to serve in that capacity.
Well, I can tell you this: Zach Streif's not going anywhere. I mean, he's very well respected. He could end up being full-time offensive line.
When I say clean house, I don't necessarily mean that you need to everybody needs to be going from that side of the ball. But I'm just saying major changes need to happen.
Yeah, we'll see. I think they'll take a hard look at all that. I think above everything, though, even in defense of Pete Carmichael, it comes down to quarterback play, and whatever happened at quarterback this season, I don't see how anybody can evaluate it and not say it was just a disaster. You went out in the offseason, you made a run for Deshaun Watson. That failed. Your backup plan was to bring back Jameis Winston. You gave him a decent contract. I mean, he's making starter money, and then you
didn't give him a chance. Exactly.
Yeah, you bailed on that plan after a few weeks. That's the one thing I can't kind of reconcile in my mind. If you didn't believe in him, then why did you bring him on board to begin with? I mean, they didn't really give him a chance after he got hurt, and now you got him still on your roster. I mean, he's obviously, disenchanted. This whole thing has just been a disaster the way it's played out. And I think that misjudgment, or whatever you want to call it, has really saddled the team offensively, no matter who the coordinator was, because you don't have – basically you're trying to make hay with 2 backup quarterbacks.
I know you didn't necessarily agree with me, or you didn't – I don't think you disagreed either, but I'm telling you, I've been saying it for weeks. He pissed somebody off. I don't know what he said back there did.
He didn't piss anybody off.
It's the only thing that makes sense.
Piss anybody off. I think more than likely what's happened, at least I'm not 100% sure, but I just think they trust Dalton more. I think that's the best way to put it.
Okay, even if you trust Andy Dalton more, I get that. Okay, and whether I agree with it doesn't make a difference. That's your decision. That's who you trust. But at what point do you say it doesn't matter who we trust? We're 4-9 for God's sake.
Oh yeah, I mean, look, I'm not endorsing how they've handled it. I'm just saying.
But that's just stubbornness.
He didn't piss anybody off. I mean, I've not heard that, and I talk to people all the time out there.
You're one of the few people that I would believe. So
everybody likes Jameis Winston. No one. He's universally liked at all levels of the building. He's a good guy. He's a team player. He's handled this thing. I know he spoke out a little bit.
That's where I was going next.
We react. I think in New Orleans, we tend to react way too much to those kind of things. I mean, that stuff goes on in other markets, and people I remember
would not have happened under Sean Payton. No one would have ever said that under Sean Payton ever anywhere. He'd have been bye-bye.
I know, but I think I've just in my experience, the Brandon Cooks line, Jimmy Graham,
who was exiled.
People think that
who also was exiled,
but that's not true. I mean, Jimmy Graham, They tried to bring him back. They love Jimmy Graham. Ask Sean Payton right now about Jimmy Graham. They love Jimmy Graham. Everybody in the team loved Jimmy Graham. All the players loved Brandon Cooks. Like Brandon Cooks, they tried to trade for him last year. So sometimes you just make a business decision. You make a move with a guy with value. It doesn't necessarily mean that, he was a cancer in the locker room. I think that stuff gets –
I'm not saying Jameis was a cancer in the locker room. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying I think that's not what I'm saying at all. I think the players like him. I think that somehow, some way, you only have to piss off one or two people to lose your job. I'm in the right people. So I'm not saying
nobody's told me that, and I would know that. I don't think that's it. I think they don't trust him as much as they trust Andy Dalton. And at this point with this team where they're at, I think they needed somebody they could depend on and be reliable. And he was playing well when Jameis started getting healthy again. It would be hard to take him out of the lineup. So there's also a timing element.
Your definition of well and my definition of well are two very, very different things, because it's like I said a couple of weeks ago. I think he played extremely well against Tampa Bay. There is nothing in the Tampa Bay loss that is Andy Dalton's fault. Not a single thing. But you can go through almost any other box score from any game this season, and I know we got to cut it short soon, and I actually want to spend a minute or two talking about the Pels. But you could take a box score from almost any game this season, and they're all the same. Andy Dalton's line is throughout the entire career, 80% of his box scores are the same. So I mean that's great, but this isn't a team that can't take a chance. And I get Jameis Winston has shown he can throw 5 interceptions in a game. All fine and good. This team from day one it wasn't a Sean Payton team from 2018 where, Andy Dalton probably could have led the team that had the no-call year. I'm not saying he could have led them that far, but that team would have still made the playoffs with Andy Dalton. Because Drew Brees was showing that. I mean, if it's just the point of that. If you got to take a gamble, if you got a team that needs to take a gamble, don't be stubborn. Don't stick with status quo. Status quo will get you status quo. This team can't afford that.
Here's the other thing that I think no one's talked about in this Winston Dalton debate. You'll never read it, you'll never hear it. But what do you think the players on the team? You think? I guarantee you, Dennis Allen did not make that decision in a vacuum. I guarantee you, he talked to the leaders on that offensive team, on that offense, and got their intel on who they wanted to be a quarterback. And I guarantee you, it's Andy Dalton, and that's why he's in there. It's not the difference between the two is not enough, and so you go with who maybe the players believe in, and I think that's what happened here. And so, and obviously, Dennis Allen cannot come out and say that. They can't come out and say that publicly, but I guarantee you that was a big part of why they've gone the direction they've gone at quarterback.
I don't deny that, and I believe that. The problem is when you get to a certain point as a coach, you have to say, I don't care what they think anymore. We have to make a change, and you need to sit them down and make them believe in your decision. And as a head coach, you're the leader of the team. At some point, you say, you know what, guys, we talked about it. We've gone with Andy Dalton for 2 or 3 games or 4 games here. But I just feel that if we continue to go in this direction, that we're not going to win. Or you don't say it like that, but I mean, that's the point you make. And you have to make a decision. And to make a decision because that's what the players want, sometimes what the players want isn't good enough. And you have to, and that's the problem I have with Dennis Allen. I think he's too much of a nice guy. He's too much of a, he's just this, be strong, make decisions. Yell at a guy because he's got the wrong cleats on.
He does. Behind closed doors, he's a different guy. He's in meetings. He's much more intense.
I've never seen him once chastise anyone.
Well, I know people haven't seen that on the sidelines, but that's kind of the way Greg Williams operated. Greg Williams was a tyrant during the week in practice, fiery, demanding in meetings. And then on game days, if you ever watched him, he hardly ever raised an eyebrow because he said, look, it's an intense situation on game days. Those guys, the emotions are high. He wanted to be the calming force because he knew his players were emotional. Sean Payton was the exact opposite. He's like a teacher during the week. On game days, he was a psycho. DA is a little more like a Greg Williams. I've heard in meeting rooms, he's very fiery, very intense, holds these guys accountable. They all understand it. But on game days, he has a different demeanor, for better or worse. I'm just saying he does during the week hold them accountable.
All right, I'm going to give you the last word on that. So, again, you would know you're a lot closer to this team as I am than I am. I'm just telling you. I mean, one thing I'm usually pretty good at is interpretations, and that's just my interpretation of the thing. But I have to, more than I do on that.
Well,
we have to make our predictions, but I do want to spend 3 minutes talking about the Pelicans before I let you go.
Yeah.
So let's talk about them last night. Obviously, Dunk, you stayed up to watch the game last night. What a great chance, Trey Murphy with the big shot from the right wing for them to even send it into overtime. They just don't match up well with the Jazz, but to me, that's no big deal in the grand scheme of things. This team is certainly on the right track.
Yeah. Look, back-to-back losses. They hadn't done that all year, I think, and they also now have to go to Phoenix.
Yes.
Game. I thought
they'll be really pissed off.
I thought they really missed Jose Alvarado last
Yes.
night. Like his defensive perimeter play would have certainly been more effective against, say, Jordan Clarkson or, maybe handling some of those pick and rolls late with Mike Conley. So they missed Alvarado. And they obviously also missed Brandon Ingram. I don't want to keep harping on who they're missing, but they need another scoring option, in that game especially. They really did. I thought Utah did a good job. And on Zion got his points, but he had to work for it, man. Their size inside created some problems for him. And they just executed better than the Pels down the stretch of regulation and in overtime. And that was a tough loss because they kind of had a nice margin there. I think they were up by 13 at one point.
Yes, they were up by 13 with 9.5 to go in the third quarter.
Yeah, kind of let it slip away, and that's the NBA. But this is a tough stretch because they go to Phoenix. Like you said, Phoenix is going to be laying in wait. They've got Booker back, so they're a different team. And then you got Milwaukee in the Smoothie King Center on Monday night. Very tough stretch.
I'm really looking forward to seeing what they do against Milwaukee on Monday. That is going to be a lot of fun for sure. And I think this stretch will tell us a lot. I think we've already learned a lot about this team, but one thing we learned last year is that Willie Green is going to have this team ready when they come down the stretch. This team is only going to get better as the season goes along. We've already seen it. I mean, I think the improvement of this team over the course of the last 3 to 4 weeks, again, showing how great a coach. You want to talk about extremes, and I'm not going to bash DA, but I think Willie Green is the Sean Payton, could be a Sean, and they have different personalities and different ways to handle things, but I think Willie Green could be the Sean Payton for this franchise. For this Pelicans franchise going forward, Dunk. I really do.
Yeah, he's been a total find as a head coach. And
no question.
Perfect guy with this team, too. His demeanor, knowing the personalities on this team. I think getting C.J. McCollum was also a huge get because
big deal.
Now you have a player coach kind of that all these young cats, respect. And then you got Willie Green, who's definitely a player's coach, knows how the modern NBA player, like how to motivate them. It's been a perfect marriage, and I agree with you. Look, even though they've lost these last couple of games, even if they lose to the Suns, I'm bullish on where the Pels are headed. I think they got another move in them, probably somewhere around the trade deadline to kind of bolster the roster. They've got some tradable assets, but the future's bright, and you just need to start pulling against the Lakers every night so you can get that high draft pick as well.
No question about that. And, I mean, I really think the Pels really already are the deepest team in the league. So, we'll see what happens. All right, it is prediction time. I know that you have got to get going. We have one more comment that I want to show. If you want to make a prediction, now's your final chance. Don says the largest criticism he has of Andy Dalton is that sometimes he throws the ball too hard. The quarterback play is not the problem with the Saints. The offensive line play leaves a lot to be desired. Defense playing superb football. I don't know if I'd call it superb football. Turnovers have haunted this team all year long. If you look at the turnover ratio, the turnover margin, Dunk, one thing that Sean Payton's teams were always really good at was time of possession and turnover margin.
Yep.
Those are the winning formulas for any team, but really Sean Payton left that mark, and they were always good in those two things.
Yeah, and they've been on the flip side of that this season. And the lack of takeaways by the defense, as good as the defense has played, they don't have a ton of big plays. And those have been missing, and that's something they've got to figure out. I don't know why it's been that way, but they're just not getting those big takeaways. and they've been penalized a lot defensively. I mean, that gets overlooked, but the way they play, they're very aggressive, very handsy in the secondary. It's one of the reasons why they're good, but it's also can come back to haunt them when they get to these crews that call it tight, and they end up with a lot of penalties that convert first downs for the opponent.
All right, I know you got to get out of here, and I want to get you going, so let's make our final predictions. We'll make it short and sweet today. The Saints are a 4-point favorite over the Atlanta Falcons. What say you, Jeff Duncan?
Yeah, look, I like the Saints in this one. I think we'll know early on by their body language, by their energy and effort. If they bring their A game, which I think they will, I think they can win this. I think it's going to be a fairly high-scoring game. I think this game could be up in the upper 20s because I think both offenses can move it. So give me the Saints to cover that 4 points. I'd say it's going to be something like maybe 28 to 20, 24 or something like that, right on the line. I'm hedging on the line.
Hedging on the line.
I think it could be a good, fun game to watch. The Saints should let it all hang out. They've got nothing to lose in this game, and it should be an entertaining one for the fans.
I agree almost 100. I'll say I agree 90%. How's that? I think if you want to bet this game, first of all, you're a psycho if you want to bet this game.
Exactly.
But if you do want to bet it, I would bet it live. I would wait and see how the Saints come out because the Saints look good in the opening part of the game. They're not going to blow this game. I don't think so. So if you like the Saints here, I would wait and see how they come out and then bet it live because I think they're either going to win big or they're going to be in a dogfight and lose. But I'm going to pick the Saints to win. I think they're going to win by about 10. I'm going to say 26-16. I think it's going to stay under the 40. I'm not with Dunk. I don't think it's going to be, although Dunk's been better with these totals than I have. So if you want to be a psycho and bet the over under, then I would go with Duncan and bet the over. But I'm going to say 26-16. I think the Saints come back in a big way, and I agree with you, Dunk. I don't think they're going to lay down like dogs, and it would be just like them to win their last 4 games and we can say, where was that all year long? I don't know. That's for another show. But we're going to let you go because I know you got to run. We thank you for coming in, and we're going to talk to you Wednesday next week. Don't. I was just letting you say you could say goodbye if you want.
Goodbye.
All right, goodbye.
Thanks. Thanks. We'll talk next week. I expect we'll be talking about a big Saints victory.
We'll see you on Wednesday. Thanks for joining us on Dattitude Live, 9:15 a.m. Wednesday. Take your comments and questions. Thank you for joining us, and have a great holiday week, everybody. Enjoy the kiddos.